All right, let's do it. Laura, welcome.
Hello, Andy.
Hi, yeah. So it's been
Hiya.
a while since we last caught up. You've come in and done some workshops for us, and we've known each other since 2017 because I just went back and checked when we
God, is
met.
it that long?
Yeah,
Oh,
when we met
wow.
Inverness at the Change Your World conference, and I was due to go on stage and talk about being alcohol free and reaching your full potential and all the stuff that like to talk about. And then you were on a couple of sessions prior to my talk, and I thought, oh, I'll just poke my head in here and listen to what this lady Laura's got to say about digital well-being. This is quite interesting. And not only was your talk brilliant, and it was so engaging, I absolutely loved it, but there was one slide in there that blew my mind. It was just like, I can't believe that that is the sort of reality. That's a real stat and a fact. We're not going to go into that right now. We're going to save that for a bit later. But it was a really powerful moment for me, and it was a big awakening to my own relationship with digital well-being, because that's what we're here to talk about today. Really, your hero's journey in many ways that's led you on this adventure to this place of meaning and purpose in helping people to manage and improve their digital well-being. Who could have predicted that just a few years ago? I think it's really exciting. So I thought what we'd do is we'd start maybe at the beginning of your journey towards this point where you felt overwhelmed, I think, by your digital life, as it were.
Okay, cool. Well, I suppose just to give a wee bit of context, I did study psychology, social psychology, and being one of those people who study psychology who never used their degree, I was one of those, but I had an
Yeah.
interest in human behavior and I fancied myself as an anthropologist. But when I came out of uni, I ended up getting work in marketing and advertising and conferencing and stuff. And I'll always remember having this job in London. And every morning I would come in and I would turn on my computer and I'd get the email going and I'd make a coffee and I'd come back and I'd check my inbox and I could feel the dopamine. I could feel the
Yeah.
adrenaline as the emails were coming through. And part of my job as well was conference sales. And there was this sales system that was on the computer. And when people bought tickets to attend the conference, sales went up. And the pull to that, like I would have been in
Yeah.
and out of that thing every 15 minutes, checking how the sales were going. So I had this pull. And then I got my smartphone. And I didn't really notice any change around my own behavior, but I definitely noticed around me in my life people were different. They weren't connecting in the same way. They were distracted. They weren't, when we were talking, they weren't looking at me. And I sensed that there was a bit of a change happening. And then I'd moved away from Northern Ireland and I was in London and I was on Facebook. But all my friends on Facebook were still in Northern Ireland. And I started to feel a bit of FOMO. Uh, it
Yeah.
made me feel rubbish because they were all doing social stuff and I wasn't part of that. So that was all going on. And then I also remember I used to leave my laptop at home. Whenever I became self employed originally as a PR consultant, I would leave my laptop at home, obviously. And I'd be out meeting a client and I'd ring my husband and I'd say to him, because he worked from home as well, could you check my email for me? So I was getting him to check
Right.
my email whenever
Yeah.
I didn't have it on my phone. So it was something that was ongoing for me, this pull to my tech. And I
Yeah.
suffered from quite severe panic attacks. I used to have them
Okay.
reasonably regularly from my sort of early 20s, really from my working life. I was suffering from these panic attacks.
But that was
And then,
pre all the sort of the technology in many ways, do you think? Or so it
well,
was always
no,
there?
because one of the biggest ones I had, I remember now, was at the height of the pull to the conference sales updates
Right.
and the
Okay.
email checking in the morning at work. I was in a very stressful job. I'd been promoted doubly, and I was in this role I probably shouldn't have been in my early 20s. And that's when the first big panic attack happened. And there was definitely a correlation, I think, to my tech behavior. In 2012, I became a mum and I was still self employed and I was working from home, doing work with real purpose, doing PR marketing for the creative sector, for arts. I loved my work. My
Yeah.
daughter was born and I started to dip back in when she was about 4 months old. And I became so overwhelmed. I was having constant panic attacks. I couldn't control my attention.
Yeah.
I was with her, but I was not engaged. I was on my phone checking my work email. And then I would be in client meetings and I would be having a panic attack because my daughter was in my handbag, essentially in my phone.
Yeah.
And it got to a point where I couldn't cope any longer and I had to take
Mm.
time out. And I'd practice mindfulness when my dad was ill with Alzheimer's, and then passed away at quite an early age, I entered a really bad period. And this had been about 10 years prior. And I'd stopped practicing mindfulness. So I decided I needed to revisit it because I'd found a lot of peace with my mindfulness
Yeah.
practice previously. So I went back, and as a mindfulness practitioner yourself, that when you take time out of your day to just sit with your breath and really see your thoughts, you can start to understand your behavior. And I had a moment of clarity one evening in the middle of a meditation where I saw myself and this phone and this overwhelm. And I realized my phone's causing all my stress.
Yeah.
So I started to change how I used it. I got it out of the bedroom. I got an alarm clock. I took email off the phone. I came off social media. I got a watch. I did all these little things to try and improve my relationship to my phone.
Can I just jump
And
in there?
in the meantime, sorry, go ahead. I'm
Just
on a
coming
roll
back.
here.
I know you're on a roll, sorry, and it's so good, but there's a bit in there that I'm really interested in. I'm really interested in what you said there. So you performed this meditation, and within that meditation, you said you saw yourself on the phone and you made that link. Can you just explain that a bit more for me, what that felt like and what that was like? I'm just interested.
Yeah, surely. I went to a meditation group every Tuesday night for about 3, 4 years. 2 hours of meditation, a mixture of sound meditation, walking meditation, silent meditation. And I was doing this silent breath meditation. And this has happened to me a couple of times in my life. It was a real moment
Mm,
of enlightenment where
right.
in my sight, in my mind, the clouds parted. And I just had this vision of myself with this one phone that I
Wow.
could never put down. I could never get away from work because it was on my phone. I could never get away from personal because it was on everything was everywhere all the time. And it was like the clouds parted in my mind. It was
Yeah.
mad. And I remember after the 10 minutes or 20 minutes of breath meditation, people were invited to share. And I couldn't wait to share because I was like,
Yeah.
I've just had a moment of enlightenment. Um, and the whole room was clapping and everybody was
Yeah.
really, woo, Laura, because it was a really powerful moment for me. It was amazing.
And that's really important to just, yeah, pause and expand that, because I know lots of people that have had a similar experience in and around a meditation of sorts, of that real clarity. I haven't had that experience, I must admit myself, but it's just really nice to hear it from someone that, I know really well. It was that clear to you. It was like, as you said, the clouds parted and then it was there, you with the phone, boom, penny drop.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing. So
I love it.
powerful. And such an insight then to start to try and make those changes.
Yeah.
So I went on this journey of changing my behavior. And then I just got quite interested in the topic of digital detox. And it was being written about in magazines. And then I came across this documentary, a journalist who admitted he was on his phone all day, and all his
Yeah.
friends admitted it as well. Went to America, put his phone away for 2 weeks and immersed himself in this really unusual meditative outside woods forest experience, and he had an enlightenment as well where he
Yeah.
realized, he admitted that when his mum was on her deathbed dying of cancer, he said, looking back now, I spent the whole time with the phone in my hand. I wasn't present
Yeah.
with her.
Ouch. Yeah.
And I can look back and I regret that, and I don't want that to happen moving forward. So I watched this documentary and it was mind blowing for me. I thought it was really powerful. Um, And I had a sense there was something going on. I always felt I wanted to use my psychology and I didn't know why. And I loved my
Yeah.
work at the time, but I wanted purpose. And then I was on the train commuting into London one day and I sat down beside a woman flipping around her apps on her phone, from WhatsApp to photos to calendar to Facebook. And watching her, even though you're not meant to watch people when they're on their phones, was making me feel agitated.
Yeah.
I'd chosen the commute to not look at my phone, to look out the window or meditate or whatever. And then on the way home, I saw a fella sitting beside me on an iPad watching Sherlock Holmes with Benedict Cumberbatch while playing solitaire on his phone. And I just had a
Multitasking.
bing, this light. Yeah.
Yeah.
What I thought was, you're on your way back from a day at work and you need to chill and recharge. And you're trying to do that, but you're doing two things at once and you're not probably getting as much as if you'd absorb yourself in one of those
Yeah.
tasks.
Exactly.
And that's when I had the sort of, God, something needs to happen here.
Yeah, almost epiphany. And just even coming back a little bit, because you mentioned about a documentary there, and if you don't mind, I just want to use that as a bit of a segue to talk about a really powerful documentary that's come out recently, The Social Dilemma.
Oh, I talk about it every day.
Do you? Yeah, and I was going to say, what's your
Yeah.
view on that? Do you think it's been really beneficial and helpful to, again, getting people talking about this thing that is their digital well-being?
Oh my God, amazing. Have you seen
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, I have seen it.
I think
Really,
it's
really powerful.
yeah, I think it's phenomenal. I think the way that they use the young man and the narrative of the dramatization of him
Yeah.
to let us see what's happening behind the scenes, and hearing the people who created Facebook and Twitter and Instagram standing up and saying, I used to go into the cupboard at home to check my phone because I didn't want my kids seeing me do it. Oh my God, I felt the addictive elements to this stuff and I needed to change my behavior. What do they say? Don't get high on your own supply. And then the fact that all these people have left the industry to work on the other side to try and support people to improve their digital health. I think it's really powerful and I'm recommending it to everybody over 12, basically, needs to watch
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there was a real sting in it. And I think you've just touched on it there. I think it was one of the ex-Facebook directors that basically said, I won't let my kids near the tech. And that stung me a little bit. As a parent, I went, hold on a minute. Had that real sense of almost like you can imagine the big tobacco firms and the directors knowing in the 1960s, this is really killing people. It's really bad for people. So we're not gonna smoke ourselves, but we're gonna keep selling this thing to everyone else. It was a real sting for me. It was like, ouch, right, hold on a minute.
Yeah.
My kids have got hold of this stuff. And an important point that you also just made there is that we sort of think, oh, it's a teenage thing. And I've got teenagers and we look at them and think, oh, they're using their tech too much. But how many parents are sitting there having a conversation about their teenage kids using their tech too much whilst on their phone, whilst flicking on their phones?
Precisely. And from day one in workplaces, I've always had the hand up going, what about the kids? Um, we need to change our behavior, become
Yeah,
aware of our own pull. I had a guy recently contact me to say, my daughter is addicted to her phone. What can I do? And I'm not an expert in kids and tech management, but I know enough about it. And the adult psychology to be able to, and also as a parent myself, and through the work I've done and the stuff I've read, and I sent him an email with some links and stuff, and then I put some of my own bullet points down. And one of the main things is don't contradict yourself. Don't tell them to put it
yeah.
down, and then while you're scrolling through your own. And he sent me back a really nice response that basically said, I need to look at my own behavior.
Yeah, it's so powerful, and I
You know,
think that's the case for. And I always say this around alcohol. People will come to me all the time and say, "I've got this loved one or a family member that I'm worried about their drinking. What's the best thing I can do?" And I'm like, "The best thing you can do, without exception, is to stop drinking yourself or take a break from alcohol yourself." It's the most powerful message that you can send. So I think in this example, learning to manage your own technology is the best thing that you can probably do for your children. Otherwise, it is a little bit like the doctor telling you not to smoke whilst puffing on a cigarette, isn't it? And that stuff just doesn't land home at all. It's like you can just sense the incongruency of the whole message, whereas it has to come from that place of empowerment. And I think that's a really important message about today's topic, that this is for us as humans to realize that we are all in many ways fallible and gullible to lots of this technology. I know it originates, many of these concepts and ideas, from a guy called BJ Fogg. I'm sure you're probably aware of. He wrote an excellent book called Tiny Habits, but he had a lab at Stanford which was called Technology Persuasion Lab at Stanford. And really what he decoded was the human brain, and realized how sort of simple it is in many ways, that we're these perfectly imperfect humans and we're full of thinking flaws and biases, and we're easily misled, unfortunately, or led down a certain route. And what he did in a really simple methodology around motivation, ability and prompt, if I remember rightly, was actually create a system that would encourage people to use things or change their behavior in a certain way. And out of that lab came a guy who ended up being the co-founder of Instagram. That was never the idea from BJ Fogg. He was just trying to teach people, how the brain works and how you could use persuasive technology. And here we have Instagram and Facebook that have refined all these tiny little tweaks. It's not an intelligence thing, it's a human thing. And we're all equally as fallible and can be lured into the same trap of the endless scroll and all of the things that social media does so well. So I think, just to make that point, it's not about an IQ thing or a sense
No.
that I'm this perfectly rational creature and I can decide off my own merits whether I use this technology or not. We've got to be aware that we will be sucked into this stuff unless we put certain measures in place.
Yeah, you're using it the way it was intended to be used.
Yeah,
It's been designed to hook you in. And Tristan Harris, who features very heavily in The Social Dilemma, who I love, there's a quote we share in our kickoff session, which is, it doesn't matter how many PhDs you have. It doesn't change the fact that the underlying limits of the mind are the same for everyone. And that's Tristan Harris,
exactly.
who used to work in the persuasion lab at Google and left to work on the other side. That's what he says. Yeah. Like for me, the way I manage it now, most of the time is it's not present. It's nowhere near me. No, I'm not on social media, but I've still got a pull to my inbox. It's incredibly strong. And if I had one phone and my work email was on that phone, I'd be on it all the time. So I have two phones, and I've got a phone for work, which stays at work, but there's no email on it because then a big school. And I leave work at work. I leave work at work. I close the laptop and I leave it behind because I know how strong my pull is. And during lockdown one, whenever I had to come home for a bit and bring
Yeah,
the laptop back with me, the pull's there, and I caught myself on opening it up and wanting to check my email at like 8 o'clock at night. That's the antithesis of everything that I'm about, but I'm
yeah,
vulnerable, like everybody is. Even though this is what I do for a living now, I'm meant to be an expert in this stuff, and I am. But when it's within my reach, the pull's still there, and that's because it's down to stress. It's down to those vulnerabilities as humans. Why do we turn to the tech? We turn to the tech because it's designed in a lot of cases to hook us in. But on the other side of things, email isn't designed to hook you in, but there's a lot of psychology behind your relationship with your inbox because of what your inbox does for you.
yeah.
And for me, the physical barrier is uh, the biggest tool I have, really,
To
in
remove,
my
yeah.
world.
I must admit, and this is not about being a Luddite either, is it? And just like, saying we can't have technology because technology is here to stay. I think it's managing our relationship with it. But I also had a Nokia 3310 at one point. I think I remember showing you, which was the basic phone that all it does is ring and you can text. And I used that for about 2 or 3 months actually, and it was really liberating. It was a great experience. I got into the lift and actually spoke to people. I had to ask directions and things that you just don't have to do anymore. But equally, it was very limiting. And, for my
Yeah.
wife even trying to contact me, because everyone else is using the same tools, such as text or WhatsApp, the text would come through this big, convoluted story of a text. And my response would be, "Okay." That was it, because I couldn't double tap. If you've tried to double tap texting,
Oh, yeah.
that can't happen. So our communication broke down a little bit in that, the basic sense. And obviously then there was the frustrations of not having that wonderful technology at my fingertips. Like occasionally Google Maps for me is so incredibly handy, or when I'd arrive at the airport and go, I haven't printed out the email, and there was no way for me
Yes.
to get hold of it. There is so many benefits to our technology. I think the key is, like you say, is to find ways to manage it. And I think ideas like that is such a great one. If you can,
And
if that's
everybody,
possible, separate the two.
yeah, and everybody's different. And yeah, we do say, we're trying to get people to reframe their relationship with technology, not remove it. I suppose
Yeah,
the point I was making there was, I would call myself really a digital minimalist. What
yeah,
I've done is really pared everything back to what I really need and what am I going to use with real intent, and that's what I use, because the things like social media, it didn't bring enough benefit to my world to outweigh the negative aspects for
yeah,
me. So that's why I've come off it. And when it comes to my work-life balance, for me, it's just easier to have that physical separation from the device. Now, Anna, who co-founded the business with me, she's a big fan of using tech to manage your tech. So she'll have like apps on her phone that will
mm,
disable her phone for half an hour so she can
yeah,
focus her mind, or so that she can listen to a podcast but not be interrupted by WhatsApp messages or whatever. She's really turned towards the technology to manage it. Whereas my method has much been more of a sort of paring back. But the point is, everybody's different. And as you say, it's
yeah.
not going anywhere. This is a world our children are growing up in. We've got to turn towards it and work out what's going to work for me and then what's going to work for them, because they're different people. But having an open dialogue with them about this, and having an open dialogue in the home with, because your partner will probably be different as well, but it's not being scared to talk about it, because it's causing a lot of stress for a lot of people, you know.
Yeah, and I think this is the overarching theme is awareness, isn't it? It's like whilst
Oh yeah.
this technology is used mindlessly, a bit, you know, we always talk about in the world of alcohol as well, when you're drinking mindlessly, you're not just thinking about it, there is no conscious awareness of it. I think it will take you down a path that's unhealthy in many ways. But once that awareness comes through and you're suddenly aware of the amount that you're using your technology, or the reasons you're turning to your technology, because we sort of touched on that briefly there, but I think there's a lot of underlying, you know, Gabor Mate says this about addiction, but I think there are some similarities there in many ways. People are addicted to their technology, but he'll often say things like, it's not why the problem, it's why the pain. And I think there's an element of that. Why are people turning to their
Oh
technology, I
God,
think, to
that's
soothe
the
away
whole thing.
psychological pain?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. And it's the whole thing about, you know, you don't need to listen to your thoughts. You know, the University of Virginia study where they put people in a room, a blank room with no windows, blank walls for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And they said you can either sit with your own thoughts, or you can press that button, you'll get an electric shock.
Electrocute
And
yourself, yeah.
something like two-thirds of them electrocuted themselves. One man pushed the button over 140 times. We don't want to be at one with our thoughts, because our thoughts
Yeah.
can be really negative. So now there's a way where we don't need to be at one with our thoughts, because we can just busy ourselves on our devices. And yeah, that's a massive part of it. The lack, like I talk now to people about, when was the last time you were truly bored?
Mm.
And people will admit they can't remember. You don't need to be bored anymore. I've also recently asked a question on a poll, which I had never done before, and I'm going to use it more often. How often do you double screen? Which means, how often do you sit in front of the TV scrolling through an iPad or a phone? And I think the response was about 60% of people,
Yeah.
which to me, now we don't double screen in our house. When we sit down, we have purpose. I've chosen to watch this program, and I'm going to get as much out of it as I can. But over half of the population are double screening, and I'm like, no, guys, watch the telly.
Yeah, I mean, double screening, it sounds, yeah. I mean, and I would say it's even higher than that. I've noticed that so much. Even, you know, I'm not one for that, but I've definitely seen that in my own house on numerous occasions. And then we try and put that to bed. It's like, come on, you're either watching this or we're not watching it. We can sit on our
Yeah.
phones. But I can imagine that's going on all the time. So everything is sort of diluted, isn't it? You're not really getting a rich experience of even just watching the telly or being on social media. Everything's just this like low grade mush, like cardboard sort of information that's not allowing our brain any space to switch off or be bored or just daydream and do all the things that, you know, let's be honest, historically we've evolved to do. It's only in the last, you know, whatever it is, 20 odd years that our minds now have just gone to this place of never being able to rest, I think. And this is where it's a culturally a much bigger issue than we think. But equally, it's this juxtaposition, isn't it, between this wonderful technology, which, you know, we love and we get to use, but also not allowing it to smother us in such a way that the upsides, you know, are far outweighed by the downside. And I love something you said earlier about digital minimalism. That really resonates with me, being really conscious about, right, what is it that I'm going to use that adds value to my life? If it's social media, brilliant. If that's a really conscious decision. But equally, I'd use technology such as Facebook all the time for the groups that I create. And I think they're wonderful. It's a brilliant way to create community. But equally, I don't use it for traditional social media. Although I put lots of stuff out on social media. I'm live every day at sort of 7:15. But I'm not a consumer. I've really spent a lot of time, just like you, getting really clear on how do I want to use this technology. Right, I'm going to leverage the bits that serve me, and then I'm not going to go near the bits as best I can that don't.
And the other, I suppose it's that individual differences thing. Like, you know, I'm somebody who historically has always become quite overwhelmed. Like in our
Yeah.
house, even I've got a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old, and my 4-year-old boy he talks. I don't know where he gets it from, but he talks incessantly. And having the radio on
Yeah.
as an additional noise for me is a bit overwhelming. So I quite like even though I'm a very loud person, I like silence. And if I'm running, I don't want to listen to anything. I'm just running. I'm exercising with, you know. Whereas there are other people like Anna, who I work with, she's constantly got the radio on. She runs with podcasts. Everybody's level of overwhelm and what they can absorb is different. And that's why I think I've gone down this digital minimalism road, which I won't take that that phrase for my own. It's Cal Newport's phrase. He wrote
That's
Deep Work.
right.
He
Got a
wrote
great
Digital
book. Yeah.
Minimalism. And he's written a new one. Have I got it? Andy, drum roll.
Oh, here we go. A
A
world
world
without
without
email.
email. Oh,
Yes.
oh, Cal. So, yeah, I found that that's the best approach for me. My husband, the most zen man who ever walked the face of the earth, uh, no stress around his tech. He's only got one phone for work and personal use, doesn't bother him. He uses his eBay app quite a lot. He's on Vinted, he buys and sells stuff. He listens to podcasts, he gets news updates, but he doesn't get overwhelmed. Whereas if I was existing the way he does around his device, I'd get overwhelmed. So it's about understanding that we're all different and there's no right or wrong. It's just about personality type and disposition to stress, etc. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's that awareness piece again, and that getting to know thyself a bit better, and that not comparing. It's not like, well, it works perfectly for them, so it should work for me. We're all so individual that it's
Yeah.
that awareness of, actually, I am overwhelmed quite quickly. I will become stressed. I do struggle to manage this, and like you said, put those barriers up. That digital
Yeah.
minimalism, remove the phone physically if you can. Have two phones. All of these ideas that maybe we'll get into in a second, but I just want to come back to the story. So here you are, you're starting to change your own relationship with technology. And then how did you find yourself sort of transitioning, let's say, from the work that you was in to what you do now that fills you with meaning and purpose?
Um, well, I just had a very, very strong feeling that this was so needed.
Mm,
Um, so I started to read a bit more about it, and I had a good friend who was the MD of a really successful productivity training company in Brighton called Think Productive.
okay.
Um, Graham Alcott founded Think Productive, and he's he's written a lot of really good books. And I basically asked my friend to introduce me to him, and I went and he gave me an hour of his time, and I was really stressed. This man's a productivity expert, and he's given me an hour of his time, but it was really chilled. And I told him what I was thinking, my ideas about the world and what was going on and what maybe needed to happen. And initially it was all consumer facing. I was thinking we were going to like run camps and stuff. And he said, no, 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 you don't want to do that. You want to go and work in workplaces. You want to get to people through their jobs.
Yeah.
So we then just started to, I approached Anna. We'd been doing PR marketing work together for years anyway, and told her about it. And she actually was working on a Italian food PR campaign at the time. And the client would email her, and if she didn't respond, he'd Facebook her. And if she didn't respond, he'd WhatsApp her.
Oh,
So
wow.
she was suffering from
Yeah.
severe work overwhelm. So then I just basically started to wind up the clients that I had. I told them my plan and had a 6 month period of sort of transitioning from closing up the PR and marketing accounts and starting to really research what this thing might look like.
And how did that
And then
feel for you? Because that is a big move, that, isn't it? You've got this like tug. What was driving that? Where was that coming from? Obviously, you'd had this nice experience yourself, and you thought that this was needed in the world. But it's still quite a big leap to go from, right now I'm going to start winding up all my clients, and I'm going to transition into this thing. And I guess it's pretty much unknown at that stage. I guess it didn't even exist.
no, I know. I think it was as much as looking around the world and just going, no, this isn't right.
Right. Okay.
I'm sitting on this train and nobody's talking to anybody.
Yeah.
Not that I'm expecting strangers to sit on a train talking to each other, but why are everybody's too absorbed? This is not right. This is not what we're meant to be doing. And I feel overwhelmed. So if I feel overwhelmed, other people must feel overwhelmed. And I talked to people. I talked to Lynn, my sister, who she was
Yeah.
feeling really overwhelmed, other friends, people. And I just had this real sense. Now, we haven't added into the story here was we also decided we wanted to have another child. So
Okay.
as I was winding up the old business and starting Shine Offline, I got pregnant. So the first year of Shine Offline, I was pregnant. I was standing on stage. The first job I did, I had a massive bump. So I don't know what zone my head was in, but I just must have felt very superwoman or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I felt very passionate that something needed to change. And for some reason, I felt that I could be somebody who could make a change.
Yeah. And that's your real call to adventure in that hero's journey. And that takes a ton of courage to, again, step over that threshold into the unknown. Because, like I said, at that stage when you started Shine Offline, no one was even really talking about this stuff, were they? Obviously, the technology was out there, but no one was really talking about managing your digital well-being. I guess, did you find any sort of resistance to that early on? Was there any big obstacles that you had to overcome?
Well, we didn't even use the phrase digital well-being in the first year and a half, because it didn't really exist.
Yeah,
So we talked about improving your relationship with your phone. It was really about your phone back then. It's a
yeah,
lot bigger than that now, and it's a lot more workplace orientated now. That rather than just about you and your device, you and your smartphone. But there wasn't really resistance. I was told once by the global head and safety head of a bank that we were too innovative, that we were before our time, that this is a problem, but that people aren't quite ready for it yet. And that was about 3 years ago. Um, and don't get me wrong, like we worked our asses off and we didn't make
yeah,
any money. We didn't earn any money for 2 years. We billed, but it was small, and we put it back into the business to market ourselves and stuff. But um, I think there was a bit of a once you started the conversation. Well, if you managed to get somebody on the phone or into a coffee conversation, the minute you started talking about it, you could see them going, "That's me, that's
yeah,
me, that's
yeah,
me." And I think that's as well why I felt so strongly about it, because anybody I'd spoken to about it would all they then wanted to do was talk about themselves.
yeah,
And I thought this is resonating with everyone.
yeah, yeah.
Everybody seems to have their own story. So there's value here in supporting people. There's got to be.
And then, so how did that take shape? You started to transition out of your existing clients to start Shine Offline. What form did that take? Was it workshops? Was it you going directly into businesses? Was it, direct to individuals?
Well, I actually approached my sister, who's very useful, who was
Yes, I
working
do.
for
Yeah,
a
yeah,
media marketing music agency at the time. We had this idea that a lot of our work would be team away days. It isn't, but we that was our original concept. So my sister got basically her agency and their sister agency to put together 30 staff, and we were given them for a day in December. And we went off to this scout hall in the middle of the woods. We got everybody to check in their phones, and we did a bit of interactive workshopping around the connected world and distraction and what's happening. We had a mindfulness teacher who was my mindfulness teacher, who did a bit on the importance of mindfulness in the distracted world. And then we sent people off to do activities in the woods. It was all about reconnecting with yourself, reconnecting with
yeah,
nature. We did a sauerkraut workshop, which was all about with sauerkraut, when you make it, you then have to let it breathe, but you have to open it every day. So we got people to write intentions around their mobile phone. We'd done this workshop about how you could improve your habits around your device, and we gave people lots of ideas of things they could do. So they had this jar of sauerkraut. It all came together really well. I'm maybe not describing it terribly well, but they had this jar of sauerkraut that they'd made, and then they had to write two intentions on a label. And every day for the next month, they were going to have to open their sauerkraut to let it breathe, because if you don't open it, it explodes. And that meant they would have to read their intention every day for
love
30
it.
days. It just came together beautifully. And then the end of the day, we had some reflection where people were sort of walked around the area on their own. And then we came back around the fire camp. No, we gave them back their phones, and they had to write down how they felt. And then we lit a fire. We had a campfire, and we had hot chocolate, and everybody talked about the day. And it all went really well. I was at the start of pregnancy, so I felt sick the whole day, but it all landed really well. And then we asked the two HR directors if we could take them for lunch for a debrief. So a few weeks later, we met them. I'll never forget this. We met them out in Holborn in this crummy cafe. And we sat down, and there was a fella and a girl, and the guy went, "You're going to change the face of workplaces." And I was
Wow.
like, "What?
Wow.
I've got morning sickness. What's going on?" And the woman was like, "What you could do is phenomenal." And they started talking real HR talk about
Yeah.
workplace cultures and all this. And I was going, I just want people to improve their relationships with their phones and not feel like they have to be. But then that they were so, fired up by it, that then it started to take its own shape, because the feedback we got from them and then the conversations we had with other people, the product went back to the productivity guy, spoke to him a wee bit more, and started to let the thing evolve a bit and take a bit of courage around it. And another piece of advice was, we can't send people out for a day. It's too long. We need bite-sized sessions. We need 90 minutes. We need an hour. So we basically took a day and we put it into 90 minutes. And then we started to sell that. And our first
Like,
job was with Disney, which we did for free. But then it meant we could tell everybody we've worked with Disney.
yeah.
Um,
Is
and then
Mickey
it just
Mouse on his
started
phone too
snowball
much
from
then?
there. Say it again.
Is Mickey Mouse on his phone too much? That's what it is.
Oh, Minnie's a nightmare. Minnie
Yeah,
Mouse
Minnie's a
on that
nightmare.
Instagram, like those bikini shots.
Exactly. But that's what I love about him, these stories. It's really important for everyone listening, is that, there wasn't a clear plan. There wasn't a pathway. You didn't sort of get the flip chart out and say, I know what I want to do the rest of my life is, help people around their digital well-being. You actually had this sense, this tug that there was an injustice, and you happened to be the person that had to stand up for that in some way, and you experimented with that initial workshop, which now is completely different in terms of the way that you present the material. But it takes a ton of courage to do that. These things are not by luck. They are by courage. They are by that drive or that calling or that sense. There's just something more to this. This is not quite right the way that we're behaving. And I love that about your story. And that's what obviously fills you with this meaning and purpose. And that's why your message is getting broader and broader, and you're reaching more people, which is super exciting. And then just sort of bringing it back to that slide that I mentioned right at the start, because I just don't want to miss out on that, because it was a really important piece of information for me that really blew my mind. Do you mind just explaining what that slide was to everyone listening?
Yeah. Yeah, so it was a slide that Adam Alter shares in his TED Talk. So if anybody wants to check out that, and I emailed Adam Alter. He doesn't know me from Adam. He's based in New York, to ask him if he could give me the slide so I could
Yeah.
use it in my sessions, and he wrote back, and I couldn't believe it. So
Oh,
he's a good
wonderful.
man. So Adam Alter's TED Talk, check it out. Basically, it's a slide that shows the year the smartphone was launched, which is 2007, 2015, and then 2017, and the amount of time we spend on certain activities. So there is work and commute, sleep. Well, there's one other that's left me, and then the rest, which is your rest time, your downtime, your me time, the sweet time, the hobbies, the relationships, all that sort of stuff. Oh, the other one was survival skills or survival time, which is things like eating and washing and looking after your children if you're a parent. And what this graph shows was that the year the smartphone was launched, about half of your personal time, your me time, was spent in front of a screen. By 2015, that had grown quite a lot. And then by 2017, pretty much 90% of that time was spent in front of a screen. And it leaves this little tiny slither of yellow. And that's where we've got no screen time for our individuality and our intimacies, and that true looking into people's eyes and being outside in nature and
Yeah.
all those things that bring so much joy and meaning to our world. Since lockdown one, since last March 2020, I've been asking people in our sessions if they feel their screen time has gone up. And it's in the 80s, in the low 80s. People have said, now obviously screen time went up with COVID because
Yeah.
all of a sudden we needed to be on screen to be collaborating with people over Zoom, and we were doing Zoom or pub quizzes and working out and everything on screen. But even coming out of lockdown, people are still recognizing that habits have changed and that their reliance on their technology is even higher. So yeah, it's about that slides to sort of hold up a mirror to how we're behaving around our technology, and a bit of a wake-up call to
Yeah, it
reclaim your
was.
time.
It was for me. I mean, I'm a visual person, and to see that on the screen, and you described it like that little slither. It was like this little bit of time. It's all we've got left to be like sort of human. It felt like just to do nothing, to daydream, to spend time with loved ones was this tiny little slither. That was in 2017. It has to be higher than that now, but it hasn't got much more to go, is it? If it gets to 100%, I mean, it's incredibly sad, and I'm hoping that we might have reached a bit of a top, even though I know it feels like technology is everywhere. I think the wonderful work that you're doing and the awareness that's starting to seep in, that people are going to say, hold on, this can't be right. There has to be more to this life thing than what's on our phone. And, we've been sort of focusing a little bit there on the phone, but it's just the overall technology, isn't it? It's the email, it's the laptop, we are smothered by this stuff. And I think it really takes a lot of conscious effort and planning to protect that beautiful little slither of time that we have, and try and broaden that a bit so we have more time to read, to connect, like you said, to look in a loved one's eyes and not be like half looking at a phone or a screen. I just can't believe that that's the right way to behave. But equally, it takes a lot of work, I think, to create that structure. So just on that note, where you are at now in terms of your learning, if there were some sort of tips around that maybe that you could give to people listening to try and manage that. Equally, we're all very different, but if there was some sort of overarching tips to help manage your technology, that'd be brilliant.
Okay, well, let's start with sort of the home thing. 80% of people use their phone as their alarm clock, which means
Yeah.
they look at the phone before they go to sleep. They look at it in the middle of the night. It's the first thing they look at in the morning. Not only does it stimulate your mind and raise your cortisol, which will impact your sleep, but it puts you in a bad mood because you've looked at the news or your work email before you've even got out of bed. So make your bedroom screen free. Take your phone out of the bedroom, get an alarm clock. That's one of the simplest things you could do. I believe having two phones is a game changer, a work phone and a personal phone,
Yeah.
because it means that you can put work away, you can put personal away, you can focus your mind. Um, Creating that physical barrier between yourself and the device. If you are going to sit down and have dinner, or you are going to sit down and watch The Crown or whatever it is you're watching at the moment, put the phone on flight mode in the tea and coffee cupboard where mine lives, and absorb yourself in that moment. Create a physical barrier between yourself and the device for times. Use screen time features on your phone to understand. You can go into settings, and in digital wellbeing or screen time features, you can see how you behave around the phone. You've been on the phone for 4 hours today, what you were doing on the phone, and then you can start to set limits for yourself. So use the phone, and our blog has got lots of little articles about all this sort of stuff, all these little tips that you can do. At work, 96% of people have their phone on their desk when they're working. 94% of people have their inbox open. What's the result? 75% of people say they feel overwhelmed during the day. 92% of people say they can't do their work because they're so digitally distracted. Rethink how you use your email.
Massive.
Do you have to be in your inbox all day?
Yeah.
Most
I'm a bit.
people work through their inbox.
Yeah.
That's how we
I'm
exist.
lethal for that. I'm lethal for
Yeah,
that.
we are in react and respond. We're letting other people's priorities overtake our own. Our to-do lists are out the window because we live and breathe through our communications. So I challenge everybody I work with to close their inbox for the first 15 minutes of every hour. Or
Brilliant.
if you're on Outlook, just press the work offline functionality, which means you can see your email, you can see your folders, you can access documents, but nothing will come in and nothing will go out.
Yeah.
Which means you'll have focused time. 15 minutes every hour is not that much to not be responding, but it's enough if you're not used to having focused time. So that is, and when I suggest that, and whenever I get people to share intentions at the end of a session, that's the most popular intention that people have, because I think email causes more stress than anything else.
Yeah, and I think that's it. We can sort of blame it all on the phone and it's the social media, but in truth, I think for a lot of people, it is that inbox that follows you around on your phone, but then it's on your laptop. And I know I've definitely suffered from that much more than social media. I've never really been that bothered about that in truth. But the email is just, it's that little dopamine of, is there going to be an
Yeah,
exciting email in there for me? Or is
I
there going
know.
to be a problematic email in there? It's not, it's a really like underlying low grade sort of anxiety that rarely
Yeah.
ever feeds you with what a great email. It's like, oh, there's that like worrisome, troublesome email. So I think you're right. There's some absolutely brilliant tips in there. I think that many people will be able to take away from this. And then just bringing it back to a slightly bigger question in terms of your meaning and your purpose. I think I know the answer to this because we've touched on it already, but could you ever have predicted prior to your overwhelm with your own technology that you'd be doing what you do today and absolutely loving it?
No, but I'm going to tell you something that I've not really told very many people. Maybe
Oh,
this is a mistake.
oh, good, go for it.
You know that you know that scene in Cocktail when Tom Cruise takes the little umbrella out of the drink and he says, "Somebody invented this. Somebody created this, and there are now millions of these all over the world." And da da da. And he's
Yeah,
thinking about his purpose and what he's going to do. I remember watching that. No, not way back when I watched it the first time around, but maybe about 15, 20 years ago, and thinking, I feel that. I think there's something I'm meant to be doing. And I think that's why I turned my PR career into one with purpose, where I was doing a lot of community outreach projects through the art stuff I was doing. And I wanted to give something back. But I really feel I wouldn't have known it was going to be about digital
Yeah.
management and well-being. But I do, and I'm not like I was put on this earth to help, but I definitely had a sense that I wanted to study psychology because I was interested in people and I was interested in how they behave with each other. And so I'm not that surprised that I'm doing this type of thing. But if somebody had said that that's what it would have been, I wouldn't have. No, I wouldn't have had a clue. But there isn't a day, Andy, that I don't love it. Now, don't get me wrong, I get stressed out. And I get stressed out because I want it to be as good as it can be. And sometimes it gets really busy and I get a bit overwhelmed. And sometimes we're about to get really busy and I want it to be really busy and I'm striving for it to be. And I do get myself stressed out. But there's not a moment where I'm doing it that I'm not feeling very privileged to be in this position because I know the value of what we're doing because I get back the feedback we get is amazing. And I want to really empower people to take that personal responsibility for themselves, own your digital behavior. You can take control of this stuff for yourself if it's causing you stress. And as businesses, support your people. Do not expect them to be on 24/7. Let them have a rest.
Yeah.
Let them engage their brains when they're at work. Don't have them responding to emails within 20 seconds of getting it. We've got to talk about this stuff because it's not going anywhere. And yeah, it's for me, it's a real joy to be working in this space because it's getting more interesting as the days move forward, you know.
Yeah, I'm so glad I asked that question because that was beautiful to see you then really like reconnect with that meaning and purpose, and to go back to that Tom Cruise film, and I felt a bit like that, and I think that's the case for lots of people. There's a sense that you want to give back or do something, and you don't know what shape or form that's going to take, and then through the various twists and turns of your life, it ends up manifesting in an area that you could never have predicted. Same with me in the alcohol-free space. I could never have seen that. But there was always a sense for quite a long time of, I'm not getting any meaning and purpose from the current environment
Yeah.
I'm in. There's something more to this in service of others or giving back. I didn't know how it was going to look. And then through my own
Mm.
personal circumstance, just like you, my own relationship with alcohol was like, oh, maybe this is the opportunity now. Maybe this is, again, it wasn't a great plan. It was just sort of unfolded. And here we both are, loving this thing that we do in these completely different fields, but we both have that smile and that energy. And to hear you sort of articulate that and like punch it home there at the end was just, I thought that was really, really special, really cool. And I think that's a
Oh,
lovely place to wrap it up there. But I know you mentioned the blog there. So can you just let us know where you are online, how people can get in touch with you? That would be great.
yeah. So I'm Laura at shineoffline.com and the website shineoffline.com. And if you if you forward slash blog, you'll see the list of all the blog articles in there. And so, yeah, that's one thing I do want to say as we close, if you don't mind. I want to just touch upon screen time
Yeah.
because I think moving forward, it's not necessarily about screen time. So I'm thinking here maybe about parents and kids
Yeah.
and then about your own behavior. It's not about your time on screen. So they're only allowed to play that game for an hour. It's about what they do when they're on it. It's about the act, it's the intent, it's the purpose, it's the quality of the behavior. So I would rather a child played a game, an interactive game that they got really zoned into and that they were using their creativity and their innovation, etc., maybe playing with their friends for an hour and a half, than they were scrolling through YouTube or social media. There's quality differences there. And there's a move now towards it's not about like there was a lot of worry over lockdown. My kids are on screens all day because they're doing home learning, but they're doing home learning. And as long as you're conscious of their need to get fresh air, move their bodies, exercise, if they're learning and engaging with their teacher through that, there is positivity there. And so I just wanted to say that because it's I could become a person who demonizes this technology. And there
Yeah.
was a time where I would have been because I wanted everybody to live in the woods. But I'm maturing and I've matured over the past 5 years with this stuff. And it's not necessarily about time spent, it's about what you're doing and the negative potential that can come out if it's out of balance. So are your relationships being negatively affected because of your Facebook usage or because of your work-life balance issues where you're not never getting off your work email? Is your performance at work being affected by do you know what I mean? So it's not as simple as being on and being off.
I'm so glad
And I
you
hope you
brought
don't
that
mind me
point
just
up.
saying that because I just really wanted to shoehorn it in there and I didn't get a chance.
No, it's so important because I'm experiencing this right now with my teenage daughter or one of them. If I can hear her, then I don't mind her being on a tech. And what I mean by that is she's laughing, they're having the banter, they're having the crack with her friends. I'm like, That's great fun. That's a great use of technology. Writing off her screen time would say she's been on it for the last hour, but I don't mind that, as opposed to it's silent and there is this, this mindless, whatever it is, social media type absorption versus engaging with her friends online. I think that's a brilliant way to socialize. And they have such, honestly, the laughing and the messing. I'm like, do that all day long. Obviously, I
Yeah.
prefer you outside doing that, but that's not always possible in the modern world we live in.
Yeah.
So that is a really wonderful point. I'm glad you raised that. So I thank you, Laura.
Okay. Thanks, Andy.
Fab. All right, team, we will wrap it up there. And I think we'll do this again at a later date because I think we could have rolled that a lot longer. And this is a topic that's only going to get bigger and more interesting and more necessary over time. So thank you for all that you do. It was beautiful to hear your story of meaning and purpose around digital well-being. And we'll do this again soon.
Thanks, Andy.
See ya.